I'm absolutely delighted to have you here, Bernie, and congratulations on the publication of Stealing Baby Jesus. Please, could you tell us all what it's about?
Well, Stealing Baby Jesus is basically a treasury of ludicrous attempts to rescue Christmas. I mean, it's exactly what it says on the cover. It all began actually when my sister sent me an article from The Guardian, and the article said that Winchester, my hometown, was entering the competition to become the most Christmassy town in Britain. So I called my sister up and I said, do you remember these wonderful Christmases that apparently we had, Winchester thinks it's justified in doing this? And my sister said, I can't remember a single good Christmas that we ever had. And alas, nor could I. So I started thinking about that. And I started gathering these terrible Christmases that I had spent, many of which were funny rather than just awful. And it so happened that not long after that, I was thinking about not performing a Christmas carol. I was thinking about doing a one-woman show, and I thought, why not do a Christmas show? So I chose one story from each country, and I performed those on stage, and everyone loved them. And at the end of the shows, people would say, have you got more dysfunctional Christmases? We'd love to hear about them. And so I've actually been writing it on and off for some time, but earlier this year when the pandemic hit, I thought, well, why not see what I can gather? And I found 24 of them. So yeah.
24. So is it just because you're an optimist that you saw the funny side, or were they funny at the time?
That's a very good question. I tend to have a sort of Pollyanna view of things in general. I tend to try to find the light-hearted side if I can. And I think there's that British sense of humor where we say, oh, well, you got to grin and bear it, you know. But at the time, some of them were not fun. And I will say that certain of the chapters, I mean, if it was just funny all the way through, I think it probably wouldn't be quite such an entertaining book. But says I, who shouldn't. But there are some sad times too. And as with most people's lives, you go up and down throughout, you know, from start to finish. But I usually can find something good about it. My husband always says, well, she'll find the moral if there is one. What did she learn from it? Yeah.
Well, that's also another really good trick for finding a story within something that's happened to us. If you can find the humor, that's great. If you can find a moral or an insight, that's also extremely useful, and means that the story then can have a point in your book.
Right, and I will say that my editor, I have a couple of people that I use on a regular basis, and one particular one says, she put the note, quite detailed, that I don't always have to tie everything up with a big red bow. Not everything in life ends happily, and so feel free, she said, just feel free to say how you really felt. It doesn't have to have a moral, it doesn't have to have a lesson, just let it be. And so that was very good advice for me, because it meant that I didn't keep trying to tweak things so that people would end up with a smile. That's a character thing.
I have to say that you did that extremely well, being completely authentic. You allow yourself to be vulnerable. You are self-deprecating, but you don't overdo that. But you are able to be really honest about some of the things that have happened to you, and a lot of people aren't. So well done.
Well, honestly, I think that that's one of the things about memoirs. It's my opinion that people want to identify with you. They want to say either, well, that's what happened to me, or thank God that didn't happen to me, or wow, I'd love for something like that to happen to me. People read memoirs partly to learn about someone different, but also to see themselves. And I think that's a basic with storytelling in general. People listen to stories if they think that they can identify with the person. They want to feel like they're not alone. I would say if there was anything, it would be, I've had so many people approach me, both after the Tripoli book and after reading Stealing Baby Jesus, to say, I didn't know anyone else had been through something like this. It's so good to hear that I'm not alone.
Mm. Yeah, so yeah, well, you've done that extremely well, but it's not your first book. Your first book was Tea in Tripoli, at which I also thoroughly enjoyed reading.
Thank
And
you.
so we now know, just from just like these few minutes, that you've lived in Dubai, you now live in Austin, Texas, and you were also in Tripoli. So tell us about Tea in Tripoli, but tell us if you've lived anywhere else as well, please.
Well, actually, I think I always say I've lived in 4 continents, because it just so happens that the 4 countries
Mm.
I've lived in have been, I've lived in England, Africa, Arabia, and America. But if I were going to, I'd say Winchester and London were the main places in England, and Tripoli in Dubai, sorry, this is what happens to me, in Libya, Dubai in the United Arab Emirates, and then Austin in Texas. I did briefly live in Washington, D.C. in America, but man, that's an expensive place to live. Whoa, that's where the politicians go. So obviously, I guess that's expensive. But then I've traveled extensively, but those are the only places I've lived. And the thing about Tripoli was, I wrote the book because every time I told people an experience I had there, they would say, "Oh, you've got to put this in writing, or you've got to perform this." And it started off as a performance, as most of my things do. And I got so many letters saying, "Please, please, put these in a book." And it was a hard book to write, because a lot of the things that happened in Tripoli seem unbelievable. And even when I meet people who lived in Tripoli around the same time that I did, they'll say, "I tell people these stories and no one believes me." So it's always really uplifting when you've written something, people contact you and say, "Whoa, that's exactly what happened to me." It's so good to know that that I wasn't the only one that experienced this. I must remind, I've got to say this now or I'm going to forget. Tea in Tripoli is free on Kindle for the next 3 days.
Oh, wow.
And I'm supposed to have marketed that. And my publicist wrote to me this morning and said, "Have you told anyone?" And no,
Oh.
I haven't. So if anyone is interested in reading Tea in Tripoli,
Yes.
it's free on Kindle until Saturday evening.
Excellent. I really enjoyed Tea in Tripoli, and I really enjoyed Stealing Baby Jesus. They're both rollicking good reads, really, because you are incredibly entertaining in the way that you write. Now, it's interesting that you are an actress and a storyteller as well. Which really came first?
Well, the people who know me know that the secretary came first.
Oh, yeah, yes,
But,
of course.
and I'm not sure whether those who know me will say, "Yeah, she seemed like a bit of an actress in those days." But the actress came first. And I came to America to become an actress. And I will say that I was lucky to end up in Austin, because Austin was an easy place to start learning and start really plying my trade, so to speak. Because the theatre scene here is great. And at the time, the film scene was great too. It isn't these days because the tax breaks. People have gone to New Orleans and New Mexico and Canada. But then I couldn't make enough money as an actress. And after about 5 years, I thought, what can I do? How can I sort of expand the acting life and somehow make some money out of it? And that's when the storytelling came in, because I'd done some children's theatre, and a couple of teachers had approached me and asked me if I would like to perform in their school. And I thought, well, how would I do that? How would I perform in their school? And I thought I created the idea of a school storyteller. I thought I actually invented that, and then found out afterwards that there was an entire industry revolving around that. But one particular librarian wanted an Australian program. So I worked on some Australian stories. I memorized them, I worked them, I acted them out, and she liked it so much, she told her friends. And so they all booked me. And so for the first year, everyone thought I was the Australian storyteller. So then I created an English program, and then now I tell stories from all over the world. The thing about the writing and the usefulness of the acting and the storytelling is I always read my stuff aloud. So when I write something, it can look really erudite on paper. And then when I read it, it's dry, it's dull, it's got too many words in it. The humor was lost in the middle somewhere. And so I will somehow tweak it to make it so that it's tellable. And bear in mind, Joe, that many of the stories that I told, most of them that I put in writing, are stories that I have already told. I've either told them in an anecdote with a friend in the pub, or I've told them on stage, or I've told them to my husband and my stepkids. So most of them have already got some momentum, and most of them already have some kind of arc. The problem when you then come to write them down is you have to work out what's true. You have to, and believe me, when you'll know this, you tell a story and it gets slightly more exaggerated as you tell it. And then eventually your husband will say, that's not how it happened, dear. And you think, oh, have I done? And you realize that somehow you've gone off at a tangent. Well, I just have to make sure that if I put it in writing, it's as true as it can be. At least the facts are true. Otherwise, it's my memory. It's how I remember it.
But they say that all memoir is fiction because it's all so subjective. It's how you saw it. It's through the lens of your perception. It's affected by your emotional baggage and your experiences. So it is. They say it is all fiction. So
and it is. And if you think about it, I put this note at the beginning of everything I write. Imagine having the conversation with your family at the dinner table where you tell the story and your brother or sister, whoever happens to be there, says, that's not how I remember it. And then they give their version. And then your mom steps in and, oh God, I just said an American mom, didn't I? Mom.
You did. Mom.
Mummy, then your mummy steps in and says, dears, you are all forgetting that blah, blah happened right then. And so I agree with you. That's one of the things you have to open yourself up to, particularly if you're writing dialogue. Because how many times have you given a member of your family a piece of dialogue and then you realize, oh no, it wasn't that person who said it. It was a neighbor who said it, or your brother will say that didn't come from me. So you have to be judicious. You have to tell the truth. But you might have to be a little whimsical when it comes to the words that you actually put on the paper. So I'm honest about that, and I put a disclaimer at the beginning saying, sorry if I got it wrong.
But going back to the fact that you say that you always tell your stories out loud before you get to the final draft, do you just speak them to yourself, or do you get an audience right from the beginning?
Oh no, not. I tell them to myself, and I walk around the house with a sheet of paper, and then I put the sheet of paper down, and I see if I can just. This is me. This is the actress in me. I can't help that. And then I usually, at some point, sit my husband down with a glass of wine, and I will tell him. And occasionally, he'll roll his eyes and say, "I've heard this 100 times before." But actually, John is really good. He's a very good listener. But if I put together a storytelling program, a solo show that I'm going to perform, I just pick a maximum of 4 to 5 stories, and then they have to form an arc for themselves within that performance piece. When you're writing a book, there has to be a beginning, a middle, and an end from chapter 1 to chapter 24. So then you're working on themes and how what you have learned during the course of the piece, whether you've learned anything or whether you've gone down a slippery slope like I did in Tea in Tripoli, because I actually sum it up at the end of Tea in Tripoli. I sum up what I learned and how I've gone off the beaten track in a not good way, because honesty, I think, is the name of the game there.
That was very interesting what you've just said. So if I could just go compare your two books. So just for the people who are watching today, Stealing Baby's Jesus is a series of 24 chronological stories about a Christmas.
Yeah,
Whereas,
they call them essays in this country. I don't know if they
essays.
do, right?
Well, yes, they are. They're personal essays, yeah.
Yeah.
And Tea in Tripoli is about your experience in Tripoli. So Stealing Baby Jesus spans a life, when Tea in Tripoli spans a small period of time. Now, I can see that it's much easier for you to have a story arc and a beginning, middle, and end for Tea in Tripoli, because it's about you going there, being how you went there, what made you leave. I mean, it was pretty awful at times. I don't know how on earth you cope, but it was also very funny. It was a bit, when I look back on reading it, and it was how many years ago? 3, was it? I don't know.
Yeah, 2017. So yes.
Yes, I have this vision in my mind of you being in a grey prison. That's how I see it. It's funny in my mind's eye. But so they're very, very different. But for both of them, you've talked about story arc and theme. So the theme is pretty obvious for Stealing Baby Jesus, that it's Christmas. It's Christmas and they're disasters. But how did you put in a story arc? What can you say a bit about that?
Well, yeah, the theme for me was as much about looking for family, trying to find family. That actually there are quite a lot of themes in it. Trying to establish a sense of community wherever I happen to be. And then there is the thread of A Christmas Carol going all the way through it. And then there's the thread of my mother's, what would you call them? Crafty ideas. Now, my mother was not a crafty person, and I am not a crafty person. And yet here we are with a whole list of crafty ideas.
Yes.
Disasters, most
of them.
funny. And how I try to use my mother's ideas before realizing that I have to find my own, that you can't keep relying upon someone else to feed your anxiety. Well, it's supposed to uplift you, but it was the opposite in my case. But I would say from start to finish, the main theme is that you have to look inside yourself. You cannot keep piling stuff on the outside of Christmas and saying, well, look, I've got this beautiful tree and I've got this lovely dinner, but I feel like crap. I feel sad. Why? Well, it's because there ain't nothing going on inside. And it only took me, 55 years to work that out, or was it closer to 60? Yeah, I'm a slow learner, Jo.
Very interesting. So I'm intrigued about this. So it's for the benefit of the listeners. So you came up with your themes, and you've got your themes, you've got your thread, you've got the story arc. Did you work out what the elements were going to be in each story before you wrote them, or did you write them and then plug them in later?
Ooh, another very good question. And I love the fact that none of these are in the script that you sent me.
I know. That's funny, isn't it? I go off-piste. I'm terribly sorry.
Thank God, I'm very quick-witted and I haven't been drinking.
So 8 a.m.
So the way that I formed, first of all, I think that a timeline is really, really important. So anyone who's doing a memoir has to have a timeline, and you've got to work out where you're going to start and finish. And then for me, it's England, Libya, Dubai, and America. And then within that, there are the jobs that I worked in. And also within that, there are the places that I traveled. And so and then all the world events that were happening. So this is what I usually do before I write any book. I build my timeline. And without that, I basically don't function, because otherwise I have to keep going back and then moving it. So what family events were happening at the time, etc. But so I had, I don't know, maybe 7 or 8 stories about Christmases when I was growing up, but I'd already written 2 of them. So I put those down, and then I'd written 2 chapters, and I've rewritten them for this book, but they were also in Tea in Tripoli. And put those in. And then I got a couple from Dubai, and I hope to get to read just 3 minutes of one of them today.
Yes, you will.
And then I had a couple that I knew straight off the top of my head about my Christmases in America, specifically performing a Christmas carol. So I put those in. And then I thought, do I have, well, what are my themes here? What is common to all of these stories? And obviously the most common thread is that, as you would say, well, things seem to happen to me. I'm not sure that that's right, because I think things happen to everyone, but I can always find what did the moron Bernie do in this particular story? How did she behave? So there's always that element for me. How did I disgrace myself? Did I disgrace myself? Did I get away with it this time? So there's always that element. And then I'll suddenly remember another one, because I'm thinking about it. And so very gradually they filled out. And as they did, the commonality in the stories came to me. It was very hard to finish Stealing Baby Jesus, because I didn't know where to stop. I've stopped at 2016, because 2016 was the year I was in England, and I thought, come on, you've got to snap out of it. So that I could tell you that several other Christmases have happened since then, which might come in a later book. But so far, my attitude, since my attitude had changed by 2016, that was a good place to stop. So is that answering your question?
Yeah,
do you see what I mean? I find the threads.
I think that was actually incredibly useful to the listeners, because it showed that you're not bionic and you didn't sit there and plan it all out beautifully and then write it. You're normal. It was all a bit here and a bit here, and now I'll look at it and now I'll find the threads, which I think is extremely human and a normal way about it, and will make other people realize that they're not less than because that they didn't plan it all first. So that's exactly how I would probably have done it too. So yeah.
Yeah, I usually do have a basic plan, but often what happens with that is that it changes as I go along.
Yeah, which is
so I can. I think that's very human too. And I will say this: one of the things that you and I had talked about possibly discussing was what are the things that I think are essential for if you're going to publish. If you're going to self-publish, as I have done so far. I didn't think that I was going to self-publish this one. I did actually think I'd had a couple of agents interested in it, but I wanted to publish it this year because of the pandemic. But I think you have to have a good editor. If you, I would not be without my content editor. I've used her for both for the previous book and for this one, and she's much younger than I am, and so she has a completely different attitude. She likes things to be quick, snappy. She likes to move along, don't spend too much time on this. But she's really good at noticing if something's missing. And so as a result of talking to her, I added a chapter. And I had not thought that there was anything I could add. In fact, I was consciously avoiding adding this particular chapter. And then when I had my proofreader go through it, she said, you need another chapter here. And she said, I think you need to discuss blah, blah, blah. And I didn't want to talk about that either. And it was only under long discussion with them that I realized that those two chapters had to be added. Mostly, Joe, they are, no, cut this out. This is rubbish. And my content editor once said, I asked the question, I expect you're wondering blah, blah. And she said, no, Bernadette, I am wondering why this chapter's here at all. It doesn't belong. It's nonsense. Cut it. And I was, that was my favorite chapter. And she said, it doesn't matter whether it's your favorite chapter or not. It doesn't belong in this book. So I saved those up. And I do a little free ebook later and put all the stuff that gets cut. If anyone
your outtakes.
And I am happy to send people my outtakes.
I think
Um,
that could be
yeah.
very, very useful. How
Yeah.
it's really nice to know that you work with a content editor as well, because that's what I specialize in, and I do think it makes a massive difference just to have another pair of eyes, really. And you've also, the proofreader is another pair of eyes. So when people work with us, they get me as doing content, then they get a sub editor, and then they get a proofreader. So you get all these pairs of eyes, which I think is really important. So thank you. But now let me try and go back to my script and do what. But I guess go off at a tangent because I find it so fascinating. I think you've answered quite a few of these already, which is fantastic. But let's go to the pandemic. When it hit, you lost your work, as have so many people, and decided to write the book, partly as something to do, but also as a way of earning some money. So you worked fast. How did you manage to do it fast?
Well, as people have probably picked up by now, I actually had something already. So I didn't start from scratch. If I'd had to start from scratch, well, maybe that would have been easier. Maybe that would have been just sitting down and writing out an outline. Maybe that would have been for another book, would have been a good way to pass the time. But I already had a basic framework, and I'd already got some of the stories already prepared because I performed them 5 years ago on stage. And first of all, I mean, this sounds absolutely ridiculous, but I had to make myself get out of bed, and then I had to make myself shower. And then I had to make myself brush my teeth and stop crying because as I watched my whole year's work just disappear before my eyes, I was actually in a little bit of a state. But then somewhere in the beginning of April, I thought, you have to focus. You just have to focus. And it's easier said than done. I grant you that. You have to commit to this. And so I did the thing that I find the hardest to do in the whole world, and that is commit myself to writing for a certain period every day. And I remember when we discussed this back in 2017, Joe, I said to you, one of these days, I hope to be one of those writers that says, I sit down for 3 to 4 hours every day. Well, that's what I did. And I, even if I was still in my pajamas, even if I didn't brush my teeth and didn't get around to that until 1 o'clock in the afternoon, which did happen, I should show you some photographs of me wandering around the house in my dressing gown. But apparently there are writers that do this all the time. I'm not one of them. I'm a person that gets up and gets ready and goes for a walk and gathers my thoughts. But at the beginning of the pandemic, I was a basket case. And what happened once I got started, once I did the 3 to 4 hours a day, I would take a break at lunchtime and I would go back to it. And then I would work for another 3 to 4, sometimes 5 hours, which meant that by the end of April, I had my first draft.
Well done.
So I'm not saying it's easy, because
No.
it isn't.
No, it's bum on seat, really, and that's all it was. But I know how incredibly hard that is. So let's move on to, you self-published both the books yourself. It's not a cheap process. It's not an easy process. Which bits did you do yourself, and which bits did you hire someone for?
When I did Tea in Tripoli, I had intended to do it all myself. I read every single book there was about self-publishing. I read every article that I could find online. I did a lot of work beforehand. And honestly, I just don't think it's a good idea to do everything yourself unless you're prepared to make mistakes. And if I had chosen something that wasn't as precious to me as Tea in Tripoli, I might have been prepared to make mistakes. But because I had had an agent interested in Tea in Tripoli, and she had said it had taken me 3 years to gather my resources and 3 years actually to write it, I wasn't prepared to spend another 3 years waiting for an agent to get it published. So I thought, if this is the only thing that I'm going, maybe this is the only book I'm ever going to write, I'm going to take it very seriously. And I just worked out what I could do, what I needed to pay for. And the things that I paid for were these: the content editor, the proofreader, the cover design, I have a fabulous cover designer, and he's just the best. And if you can find one that you like, I mean, I happen to know this guy because he designed all the posters for the theatre productions I was in. So I knew the quality of his work. But you can get quite reasonably priced ones online. But I just happened to get lucky on that score. And I paid someone to format the interior of the book. Next time, I may choose a slightly, I may write a smaller book and do it myself just to see if I can. I'm very interested in the process, but for Tea in Tripoli, I wanted to get it right just in case it was the only one I ever did. Well, when it came to Stealing Baby Jesus, I wanted it done quickly and I didn't have the time to learn. So I decided then that I would use my same team because they had been so good for me last time. And the cover designer had such a brilliant idea for the cover that I thought, that's it. He's got it. Got the job. So those are the things that I think you can't do without. And then there's marketing. So first of all, you've got to commit yourself to the idea that you're going to pay for those things. And the more money you put into it, the better it's going to be. So the first little while, you're going to be repaying what you've put into it. I broke even with Tea in Tripoli. In fact, I was in profit by the end of the year with Tea in Tripoli. It was, luckily for me, it was very popular. And it wasn't a bestseller. Something's wrong there. And I noticed that Barack Obama's book is coming out the same day as mine, and his is already a bestseller. So that's a bit depressing. But then again,
he's famous, more famous.
He's more famous than I am. Yeah. So I just think it's not worth scrimping if you're going to do it yourself. Now, if you want to go the traditional route, which I highly recommend, if you can get an agent. But during the pandemic, that seemed like a long shot to me. And I wanted it out before the end of the year. So these were the things. Next book, maybe I'll try and do it traditionally. And then I'll have both. That would be lovely.
So did you make any rookie errors, do you think? It sounds to me like you actually did a lot of things absolutely right. But do you think is anything you've got wrong?
Yes. I'm not the best marketer in the world, and that's partly because even though I'm good at presenting, I tend to be a little bit introverted, so I don't like actually going to events. I don't actually like to be God, I know everyone's just saying that's utter nonsense, Bernie. You love to be the center of attention. I actually struggle with it when I'm in a room and it's me. So I'm not very good on social media. I have a person who works publicity for me and who is wonderful. But she has 100 other writers that she's working with, you know. I wish that I had the time and the inclination to learn more about social media. Someone, my publicist, that sounds so, my publicist, the lady that does the publicity for me, she said, well, we'll get you on Booksprout. I thought, what? I don't even know what Booksprout is. There are all these different places to do these things, and I don't have time. I'm a writer, and I'm being more of a writer now because I'm not so much a storyteller or an actor these days. My biggest mistake is that I don't spend enough time learning the process that goes with it. But I only have so many hours in a day. Rookie mistakes. No, I followed I went by the book.
Well done. Well, I'm very impressed that you have made a profit with Tea in Tripoli, because not many people actually manage to do that. So well done. Well, I think I would really like to turn over to you and read a little bit, please, from Stealing Baby Jesus.
From Stealing Baby Jesus. Okay. So this is, I'm going to pop this up here. This isn't going to get in the way of your camera, right?
No.
Can you see me quite clearly? Okay.
No, it's not there.
I happen to know that one of the ladies who worked at the Jebel Ali Hotel is here. So this is one of the times where I think, oh God, I hope I've got all my facts straight. But this is mostly taken from photographs, letters that I wrote home, and my journal, and my, as you know, extremely elaborate long-term memory. Okay, if you're ready, here we go. This is a chapter called Christmas and the Working Girl. In 1987, I worked at the Jebel Ali Hotel, one of the first beach resort hotels in Dubai, before Dubai became the Manhattan of the Middle East, or at the very least of the UAE. The hotel, a shimmering mirage on the horizon, rested between the Persian Gulf and the main road. It was known in my day as the Dubai Abu Dhabi Road or Sheikh Zayed Road, both of which conjure up in my mind wistful images of deserts, camels, and all things Arabian. It has been demystified now and is called E11. Way to go, Dubai. I was wretched that first Dubai December, particularly when I discovered that I had to work on Christmas Day. The hotel had turned out to be nothing like I'd expected. Like most mirages, it was a bit of an illusion. And on the subject of illusions, you should know that the conventional Victorian Christmas was alive and well in Dubai, celebrated in hotels such as the Jebel Ali, which was famous for its Christmas display. People came from all over the region just to behold it. And oh, how hard the staff worked to make it perfect for the guests. The lobby was, on an ordinary day, fabulously stunning, with golden elevator doors and sparkling tendril lighting. At Christmas time, it was splendiferous. There was a life-size replica of Santa's sleigh suspended precariously above the vast expanse of marble floor. There were Norwegian spruces with blinking lights surrounded by fake snow. Chef Lee and his patisserie team baked and built a gingerbread house, just like the one I always pictured in Hansel and Gretel. Children loved playing in it. "Can we eat it, Mummy?" they'd say. And its scent permeated the entire place. If my recollection is true, carolers dressed in full Victorian costumes sang about the bleak midwinter, with sweat dripping down their faces onto their woolen scarves and mittens. At the same time, outside the hotel, through the back windows, you could see youngsters splashing about in the swimming pool, their parents sipping pina coladas at the swim-up bar, half-naked sunbathers on loungers coating themselves with coppertone, while palm trees swayed in the warm breezes of the Arabian Sea. Every now and then, the two worlds would collide, as sunburned, sand-coated children with plastic swim rings around their middles and stripy towels around their necks wandered through the snow-covered lobby to get roasted chestnuts. Or as red-suited Santa himself, the English sales manager, as I recall, sack in hand, sweat streaming down his face, walked across the beach volleyball courts calling, "Ho, ho, ho." I've often wondered, did anyone catch the irony that Jesus was more likely born in the simple sandy world outside the window, with the heat and the date palms, than he was in the air-conditioned indoor world of hot chocolate, roaring fires, and ornamented fir trees?
Yeah, thank you. I remember those Christmas displays in Dubai. So incongruous.
I've actually got a couple of pictures that are in the book of the Santa, because I hated walking underneath that Santa. He was so big, and he always, it seemed to me that when the doors opened, he would occasionally sway up there. And I also took a picture of the gingerbread house, and you can see through the Christmas trees to the swimming pool outside. Oh, look, I just noticed that Carol from the Jebel Ali Hotel says, "Good recollection there." Yay.
Marvelous. Well, thank you so much. So where can the people listening and watching buy your book?
Well, it is available on Amazon, both in paperback and in Kindle form. It's available for pre-order now, but it's actually launching on the 17th of November. That's next Tuesday. If anyone is interested in a signed copy, I am prepared to sign a copy here and snail mail it. It may take a little while to get there, but I will do it. I just will ask if you can pay the postage for it. And it might end up cheaper. Oh no, it'll be cheaper buying it in England because you've got amazon.co.uk there.
Yeah.
But if you want it signed, I'll do it from here. And I send out a regular newsletter telling people where they can get information about my next books and where I'm performing, etc. So if anyone wants to sign up for that, just do it contact me through my website. And lest I forget, I think I've said this once, but Tea in Tripoli is free on Kindle through Saturday. And there was supposed to be a couple of pages of Stealing Baby Jesus at the back of it, but I found out this morning that they've messed that up.
Oh.
So alas, you'll have to wait until you actually get it, unless we can get it sorted out before the end of the time on Saturday. And thank you for such great questions.
Oh, you're welcome. We're going to get some more in a minute.
Yeah.
But what is your website? Is it BernadetteNason.com?
Yes, it's just my name, BernadetteNason.com.
Yes.
And it's I have someone working on it right now, so it's not quite up to date, but it's supposed to be up to date by the 17th. But there are pictures of me, and I think that there's a picture of me as Scrooge in Christmas Carol, which is my next thing coming up. Yeah.
Marvelous. Are you going to be performing online so people can watch you doing anything Zoom-like?
Yes, actually, if anyone's interested, on this Saturday, I'm actually going to be, there's a launch party at the Austin Playhouse, and because it's going to be on Zoom, you can join in from wherever you are in the world, and I'm going to be doing the full one-woman version of A Christmas Carol on Austin Playhouse's website on through Zoom on YouTube. Oh my God, this is what I mean about social media. So many different layers of it.
Oh, good. We'll watch that then.
So if anyone's interested, just connect with me, and I'll make sure that you get all the information.
Oh, that sounds great. Okay, well, thank you, Bernie. I found it quite fascinating. As somebody who loves to help people write memoir, I think there's been a lot of really, really interesting content here that I've thoroughly enjoyed listening to, and thank you so much for your great answers. So does anybody have any questions? Please ask your questions through the chat, and I will read them out again, and Bernie can answer them.
All right.
Like this. Oh, somebody's already inspired to continue with her memoir. Nikki is. Yes, Nikki, keep writing, keep writing.
And I'll just say that as a result of all the discussions I've had with about memoir writing, I've got two people, friends of mine, who've always said they would never do it. One has already written his memoir, and my husband is in the process of putting all his memories down. So it makes me very excited when I know that people are inspired to do it, because every person is a storyteller. I am a strong believer that every person is a storyteller.
I completely agree. And actually, I should just say, for some of the people listening, they might not know that I run book writing circles, and I have run one that I run on writing memoir and another that I run on writing how to. And there are places available for the ones that will start after Christmas, and they only have 4 people in them, and it's a very supportive environment. Oh, somebody's already inspired to write her. Kerry is inspired to write her Kenya, Dubai, and Cyprus stories. Does anybody have another question for Bernie? Meanwhile, I'm going to ask her one. I want to know what's next. What's your next book?
Well, I actually, this morning before I came on, I was thinking, oh no, because I know everyone wants it to be Dinner in Dubai. I performed Dinner in Dubai a couple of years ago, and all my Texas friends want that to be the next one too. But I haven't, although I've got many of the stories already written, and I have a general theme for it, because the Dubai story is really what I consider to be my personal downfall story. But thankfully it does come up again at the other end. And I don't know whether you'll remember this, Joe. I'm sure you will. But there is the story, I'm still known as the Lady with the Gin. because I once stole a bottle of gin and fell over with it and smashed it and got called up before the powers that be because it was all written up. Oh, Carol will remember this. And she's in the story. Carol Pedo is in this story. And I performed it at a fringe festival, and I actually became a finalist. I was best of the fest as a result of it. People wanted to see me fall over again, apparently. But that was the beginning of a really serious time in my life where I had to take stock and think, what are you doing? You can't continue like this. And it was the beginning of my acting career. So the whole book is, there are just so many themes in it, but most of the people are still with us. All the people that are in the book are still alive, and so I have to be very careful.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to be changing every name, but people know the Jebel Ali Hotel. And so, and look, Ian's already told me another story that I'd forgotten.
Yeah.
So it's not quite there yet. So it may be, there's a theater book about the first years I spent in Texas. And then again, most of those people are still alive as well. So I'm not 100, I'm also writing a novel. So lots and lots of, oh, look, someone just said, did I consider writing fiction? Yes. And I've started several. And one is actually based on the first year of my life of being in a fish out of water in Austin, Texas. But as soon as I started writing it, it went off at a tangent. And so I had to put it on one side. And I see there's another question too.
Yes, there's a question about social media from Maggie. We're told so much about that we need an internet presence to get anywhere with a publisher, but you've managed without. How? So what do? You must be doing something right now, because you must have, what else did you do for marketing tea in Tripoli?
Well, first of all, I'm very lucky in that I have a presence within the theatre community here. And that presence already existed on social media. And as a result of having performed some of the stories as one-woman shows, I've already had these things set up through that. And I've been on the radio and on TV, so people kind of know me. So there was a setup for me to work within. I actually hate social media. I have avoided politics at all costs on Facebook. Facebook is the one that I have I don't do Twitter very much at all because of obvious reasons. I've disliked Twitter. So what I've had to do is breathe deeply and just do it. I've had to create a presence that I usually apologize. I say, I'm sorry I'm here again, but I just want to let you know about such and such. I apologize for everything. I think the English do, in principle.
We do.
Even when people are rude to me, I apologize to them. So I think you just have to choose one or two. Choose one or two platforms. Don't try and do all of them. I chose Facebook. I do a little bit of Instagram, and I do a little bit of Twitter, just enough to keep my name out there. Dame Judi Dench's daughter liked one of my tweets during the summer, and I really hoped that was going to get me a connection with Dame Judi Dench, but it hasn't so far. So you just keep working on that, you know. If one really, really famous person were to like my book and mention it, I'd be made, but it hasn't happened yet. Matthew McConaughey, are you listening? He comes from, he's an Austin person.
Is he?
Yeah.
I think what I do, because I don't like doing it either, is my trick is that every now and again I will write a month, 2 months, 3 months worth of posts, and then I'll give them to somebody else and pay them to post them.
Oh, that is such a brilliant idea. And actually, that was one of the reasons I got someone to help me with the publicity here, because I not only didn't want to learn any new platforms, but I wanted her to say, you've got to post this on Facebook. I had to get the instruction from someone else, because if it's all up to me, I've actually got posts that are hidden, that have been up for weeks, that have just hidden. I'm the only one who can see them because I'm too embarrassed to make them public. And if you go to my my business page, my business Facebook page, my publicist said, well, it's so long since you've used it, it's not really functioning properly anymore. I was very impressed with yours, Joe. And I saw someone else's the other day, and I thought, okay, I'm going to use these people as they can be my role models to try to get a little more, I want to be writing, you know what I mean? I don't really want to be doing all of this.
No.
I'd actually much rather be writing.
So that you pay somebody else to do it. So you write them and pay someone else. That's what
Well, that's part of it. If I can get the confidence to do it myself, I will. I do.
Right, thank you. Let's see, what other question have we got? We've got, yes, have you considered writing fiction? Do writers change all the names when writing memoir? What do you think?
The reason I did with Tea in Tripoli was that I was unable, I changed every single name, was that however hard I tried, I couldn't get in touch with anyone that I knew from Tripoli. I wrote to all my old bosses in Italy. I wrote to, and just the internet was not even as powerful back in 2016, 2017 as it is now. I couldn't find anyone. So I didn't want to tell stories that included other people, particularly if they thought of themselves in a bad light. So I changed every single name. I wrote, within that, there were a couple of stories from my hometown, and people from my hometown have contacted me and said, do I know who this person is? And I said, you'll just have to work it out, you know. I mean, my ex-husband, he is in that, and people know who he is. So the Winchester people know that I was married, so they know who that is. But I'm just protecting people. I probably will do the same with the Dubai one when I get there. And with Stealing Baby Jesus, I don't mention my brother or sister. I just call them bro and sis.
You do.
Because my brother hates being included in anything that I write about. So I just do him. I keep him out as much as I can, and I do as little as I can just to make sure the story works. And as I say at the beginning of the book, my mum loved it. She wanted to be in everything. My sister doesn't care one way or the other, but I've just done them that service, you know.
I think that works very well, the bro and the sis, because what I always tell my students is that if you just talk about somebody as my friend, they become completely invisible because you haven't got a name to hang on to. And because you call yours, rather than calling them my brother and my sister, you call them bro and sis with a capital B and a capital S. It works as a name, and it works very well.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, because I discussed that at length with all the people, all my beta readers. I discussed it, and finally I just decided to go with it. And I think you must name people. And if you're in any doubt, if you think, just contact them and say, I've put you in this book, you're in this, are you okay with that? If they're not, change their name. It's that simple. And
yes.
I try to be respectful.
Yeah. Change their names, but I would also say change some details. So if they're French, make them Italian. Do something so that they become much more disguised. Right. I agree with that. And I do the same, although sometimes I describe buildings, and I'm always so grateful that I've got photographs of most of these things, and that I wrote such detailed descriptions of things in my letters and my journals, because I have occasionally written something and then I go back and I look it up and I think, I'm so wrong. I'm so completely wrong. How could I be so wrong? Well, that's because after 30 odd years, my crumbling brain is beginning to show the effects of the gin, and I just need to be much more, get something in writing, you know. But so it's good that you wrote the journals and you've got the letters. I wrote letters home to my mum for the first 10 years of my married life, and she said to me one day, do you still want these? And I said no, so she threw them away.
No!
And that was so stupid of me.
Oh my God. Well, you know, the funny thing is that I kept copies. I wrote so much. I wrote letters so often that I kept copies of my letters, not for posterity, but because I needed to remember what I'd written to make sure I didn't repeat myself. And so I actually had copies, but when my mum died, she we found boxes of all my letters. She'd kept them all. So I have the envelopes with the stamps from Dubai. I've got the envelopes with the stamps from Libya. I've got the ones that were censored from when I lived in Libya.
Oh, yeah.
So it's, for me, those are like a lifeline. And boy, as you can tell, I never stop talking once you get me going. And my letters are exactly the same. It's like I'm talking to people.
Well, it's great that you did them. So obviously that helped to set you on a great course for being a great writer. So I think unless anybody's got another question, I think it's about time to wrap up. I've thoroughly enjoyed talking to you, Bernie. Just for everybody who's listening, this will be available on my website. If you go to the virtual events page on joeparfitt.com, you'll see it at the bottom. And you will also be able to find this and other In Conversations on YouTube. And I've got, in 2 weeks, I'm talking to Olga Mecking, who is a friend of mine from The Hague, who is Polish, has written in English, which is her third language, on the subject of Nixon, which is the Dutch art of doing nothing. She had publishers fighting over her book, and it all started off with writing an article that was in the New York Times 18 months ago. She has been phenomenally successful. It came out in April and is now translated, I think, into 16 languages. How on earth did she do it? So Olga Mecking is next. So do keep an eye on my virtual events page and see other things. Lots of them are free. Some of them aren't. And thank you very much for joining me today. And thank you, Bernie. It's been lovely to see you again after 30 years.
Thank you, Joe. And I just want to say thank you also for not putting Olga's thing at the beginning, because what she's having happen with hers is what I would love to have happen.
Wouldn't we all? Wouldn't we all?
So, okay, friends, if any of you get a copy of my book, hold it up on your Facebook page and say, I've got it. I've got Bernadette's book, so that people around the world can see it. So fingers crossed at some point, we dream about what's happening to Olga. And I will be tuning in for that, Joe. I'm very
will you? But just what you suggested there, just saying to people, please hold up your copy of the book and put it on Facebook. That's exactly what our most recent author, Anisha Abraham, has asked people to do. I got an email from her yesterday saying, hold it up and say I've got it, because every little helps, and you've got to ask the people in your network.
And all of these people that you know and love, or that you're just meeting for the first time, they have their own network. And if you can put a review somewhere, if you can go to Goodreads and put a review, if you can do a review on Amazon, every little helps. So good for Olga, and I'm excited to listen to that.
Yes, I think it will be very interesting, but it's been great listening to you. You do write very well, Bernie, and I do urge people to read your books, because I haven't just asked her on here because she's my friend. I've asked her on here, I've asked Bernie on here because I think she has a lot of wise stuff to share, and her books are really worth reading. So thank you and good luck.
Thank you. And that's very, very nice to see everyone. You tell me when you're actually switching off here, and I will do.
I am going to switch off in about 5 seconds. So bye-bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Bye, Joe. Thank you.